Congratulations! You decided to become a motorcycle rider, you just went through a beginner rider safety course and got your license. Now there is a big question. Which bike should you buy? Ideally, it should have easy, manageable power output, yet it should have plenty of power, so you won't become bored with it quickly. It should be something light and maneuverable, yet stable, and being able to make that long cross-country trips you always dreamed of. It should be a modern motorcycle, with plenty of electronic safety features, yet it should be a reliable bike too. Also, it should have low seat height, so you can flat-foot it anytime, but also it should not be a puny Honda Grom or something. It should look very cool too. Oh, and the bike should not break the bank account. It's a beginner bike, after all. If you think all this sounds a bit unrealistic, you're absolutely right. There is no such a bike, because a lot of those features contradict each other. But still, there are plenty of bikes on the market which maybe not tick all the boxes, but sure a lot of them. And if there's something I learned by teaching my students to ride their bikes, it's that the first bike which you buy and learn to ride on can make a massive difference for your riding experience through the whole your motorcycling career. Too bad that quite a lot of people, despite their better judgment, go and buy a completely wrong bike, which just hinders their progress as a rider. So, your favorite motorcycle instructor is here to save the day. In this video I will reveal the single biggest mistake which people make when choosing a first bike, and also I'll give a list of bikes which in my opinion are very well suited for being a first bike. Let's go! The one biggest mistake which people make when choosing a first bike is they don't consider long-term effects. Sounds unclear, so let me explain. What we need to understand about motorcycling is that it's something that we are going to have with us for a long time, years and decades. Our goal as riders is to make sure we have a good time on the bike for the whole time, throughout the whole our motorcycling career. Our first bike is only a fraction of the whole experience. But people, when they just start riding, usually tend to have that rush, that desire to have everything right now. Usually, they have some ideal picture of them on a bike, whatever that is. Being a great adventurer, living on the road and crossing America. Being a street Rusty, dragging their knee at every corner. Or being a bearded badass from Sons of Anarchy. Whatever that is, usually those dreams have very little to do with reality. And when a new rider buys a bike based on those dream images of him riding, usually he buys wrong one. You know, dream bikes usually do not make top 16 beginner bikes lists for a reason. So, with all that being said, don't think you have to buy a perfect motorcycle once and for all, like you have only one shot at it. It's nothing wrong if you buy a good beginner bike, which is not your dream bike, get some necessary experience, and only then have an actual informed decision if you still want that dream bike. Treat your first bike like a first step of your motorcycling career, not a goal. So, which bikes are good for a beginner? There are a lot of them actually, I have a whole list of them. 16 best motorcycles for a beginner rider. This is not a tier list or anything, these bikes are not placed in particular order. They all have their strong suits. We'll start with KTM 390 Duke. It's a very good option for beginner rider, because this bike offers almost everything the new rider needs. It has upright relaxed riding position, which allows you to ride as long as you want. It's a pretty light bike, at 154 kilos or 340 pounds. It is very maneuverable and has very small turning radius, which will be a massive advantage for dense traffic riding and for training on the parking lot. This bike handles at corners like a dream. Its 43 horsepower engine has a nice snappy response, which won't bore you anytime soon, and it's perfectly capable of riding at highway speeds. It has ABS system, which will allow you to learn aggressive braking safely. And the main advantage of this bike is that you can learn anything on it. Cornering techniques? Easy. Slow speed riding? No problem. Moto Gymkhana? Here you go. A little bit of stunt riding? Suit yourself. 390 Duke is extremely versatile bike, which lets you to work on any of your riding skills and doesn't restrict you in any way. It's a perfect learning machine. Plus, because of how popular this bike is, it also has a very good resale value. You can buy it, learn to ride, maybe even drop it a couple of times, and then, when you feel like moving on, you'll be able to sell it pretty quickly and without losing a lot of money. 390 Duke has an 830mm or 32.6 inches seat height, which is relatively high for this class of bikes. Completely new riders tend to feel more confident when they are able to flat-foot their bike at the stops, and on Duke it can be a bit problematic for shorter people. I personally teach my students to stop on only one foot, so for them it's not usually a problem, but anyway, the seat height may be something you want to consider. So you've been warned. Moving on to the next bike, KTM RC390. This is a sporty version of the 390 Duke, with sport-style riding position. I usually do not recommend this type of riding position for beginners, because it is not suited for long rides, and it greatly reduces your ability to maneuver the bike at slower speeds, which is a very important step when learning the motorcycle riding. But if you are planning on doing track days and learning high-speed cornering, this riding position may be an advantage. Plus, a lot of new riders just buy sport bike because they want one, so in this case, an RC390 will be one of the best beginner options. Lightweight, awesome cornering abilities and responsive throttle makes this bike a ton of fun for a relatively small price. Next bike on our list is another version of KTM 390 platform, KTM 390 Adventure. It's a little bit more of off-road oriented bike. It has longer suspension, a little lower gearing for more low-end torque, serrated metal foot pegs, which will not become slippery in the water and mud, handguards, and universal on- and off-road tires. All this allows you to explore not only paved roads, but also ride off-road too. 390 Adventure still has 17-inch cast aluminum alloy wheels, which are not suited for proper off-road beating. On the other hand, on asphalt, 390 Adventure is still an awesome bike. Very good at slow speeds, very good at cornering, though maybe not as good as 390 Duke. And thanks to a bit higher seat, now we have a less bend in the knees compared to the Duke, so the upright riding position becomes even more comfortable for longer rides. Now let's see a couple of 390 Duke siblings, which are even being assembled on the same plant. First of them is Bajaj Dominar 400, a tranquilo version of 390 Duke. Just like its orange brother, this is an upright riding position motorcycle. It also uses one-cylinder engine, which is less powerful version of the 390 Duke engine, and it uses similar Bibre ABS brakes. Despite having lower seat, Dominar also has a bit lower foot pegs, which gives you more room in the knees, but also restricts cornering abilities a little. The fuel tank form is not as grippy as on Duke, which is again a downside for cornering. Minimal turning radius also is a bit bigger than on a Duke, but still is quite small. The weight of the Bajaj Dominar is also higher, at 187 kg, or 410 pounds. On the whole, when a 390 Duke is mostly a fun bike, 400 Dominar is a calm daily commuter, a bit softer, a bit comfier and a bit less exciting. But this is still a very nice beginner bike, especially when we see the fact that it costs significantly less than a Duke, which is already a very reasonable priced bike. And another 390 Duke brother is Husqvarna 401 Svartpilen with Pilen bikes. These are the premium versions of the 390 Duke. The premium here is mostly in a fancy looks. Svartpilen looks like modern version of scrambler style bike, with spoke wheels, round headlight and off-road tires. Svartpilen is a cafe racer imposter, with low handlebars, attack riding position, minimal fairing and again round headlight. Very nice improvements over the 390 are fully adjustable forks and a quick shifter. Otherwise, these Husqvarnas are really just a bit more expensive and fancy looking 390 Dukes. If you dig the looks, it may be an awesome beginner bike for you. Finally, moving away from KTM 390 line, the next very good beginner bike on our list is a BMW G310R. It's a standard upright naked motorcycle with 34 horsepower single-cylinder engine. It has a low seat height, so if you are on the shorter side, it's a plus, because you'll be able to flat-foot the bike. G310R has very predictable and manageable power output. It is still capable of doing highway speeds, but on higher than 110 kilos or 70 miles per hour it starts to noticeably vibrate. Where this bike really shines is on the city streets. It's extremely nimble, it's small, and its maneuverability is near as good as a 50cc scooter. You can easily go through any traffic. The bike feels extremely light, which will greatly benefit you if you are planning to do the slow speed training. Decent brakes with ABS along with the light weight will help you learn aggressive braking faster. And reasonable price tag, popularity and good resale value makes this bike one of the best choices for a beginner. Next motorcycle is BMW G310 GS, which is an adventure version of 310R. Higher seat allows more comfortable riding position for longer rides. Serrated foot pegs don't let your feet slip in the wet conditions. Wheels and tires are still road-oriented, so really it is not a serious dual sport bike, it's more of a road bike with a bit of adventure flavor to it. It still corners very good, have phenomenal maneuverability, lightweight, nice predictable throttle response and adequate brakes, just like the 310R. If you feel like 310R is a bit small for you, 310 GS might be a very nice option. It is a very good beginner motorcycle. But what if you are a cruiser guy? Are there any decent options? Sort of. I personally don't think a cruiser type of bikes are very good beginner bikes, due to their very specific riding position. This leg-forward stance is very good for long rides on very good paved roads. It's really relaxed, your knees are not bent, it's very comfy. You can ride like this for hours. But there are a few downsides as well. First, if you have to ride bumpy roads, your back will not appreciate it. Because of cruiser riding position, you can't really use your legs to support your body, and everything that goes past your suspension goes straight into your back. And the suspension on cruiser bikes usually is not that great. Second, due to low ground clearance, cruiser bikes have very limited lean angle, which will restrict your learning of high-speed cornering techniques. Due to their geometry, cruisers tend to have pretty big turning radiuses, which can be a problem when you are learning slow-speed techniques. And last but not least, again, due to their geometry and low center of mass, cruisers are more prone to high sides, so ABS is a must for a beginner. Because of all this, I saw quite a lot of people who had a heavy cruiser as their first bike and become very disappointed with it. So, if you are really into cruisers, it might be a good idea to try if this is your cup of tea, without spending a fortune on Harley right away. And I've got a couple of very nice bikes in my list just for that. Honda Rebel 500. At 185 kilos, which is just above 400 pounds, it's a pretty light bike for a cruiser, which will allow you to easily master all the slow speed techniques, without worrying too much about dropping the bike. It is also one of the cheapest cruisers on the market with ABS brakes, which will also give you more confidence while learning the riding techniques, and it will pretty much eliminate the possibility of high siding. The 471cc engine outputs 45 horsepower, which despite the relatively high weight is enough, especially considering that it's a cruiser. And cruisers are really not about riding fast anyway. So, all in all, very nice beginner cruiser option for a reasonable price. And second cruiser bike in this list will be a Kawasaki Vulcan S. It's quite a bit heavier than a Rebel, 226 kilos or 400 pounds, but it also has more power, 61 horsepower, which makes this bike easily capable of doing highway speeds. It's ABS equipped, so again, you'll have easier time learning how to brake fast without risking a high side. Also, with this bike, Kawasaki has a cool feature called Ergo Fit, which lets you to choose the foot pegs, seat and the handlebars height to better fit your body dimensions. Otherwise, just like the Rebel, the Vulcan S is pretty maneuverable for a cruiser, will not break the bank and will be a great beginner cruiser motorcycle. Now let's move on to the sport bikes. As I already briefly mentioned, sport bikes are usually not a great choice for beginner rider, and there are a whole bunch of reasons. First is the sporty riding position. Sport bikes have really low clip-ons instead of handlebars to minimize your wind resistance. So you essentially have to lay on the tank. The foot pegs are pretty high to let the bike have a good lean angle, but this also makes your knees really bend. The whole riding position is very uncomfortable and don't let you ride very long. Also, because of low clip-ons, sport bikes have very small turning angle of the front wheel, which results in a huge turning radiuses. Additionally, when you try to ride at full lock, your hands will become stuck between the clip-on and the tank, which makes slow-speed riding extremely difficult. This sporty forward-leaning body position doesn't allow you to turn your head and upper body a lot, which is very important stuff for slow-speed training. And on proper big sport bikes, like R6 or R1, the engines are designed to perform well on high RPM. On the low range, which we usually use in everyday riding, these engines have pretty poor performance and fuel economy, in comparison to more road-oriented engines. Finally, full fairing on sport bikes usually doesn't feel good after you drop your bike, which, as a new rider, you'll probably do a couple of times. All this makes the sport bike style motorcycle very poor choice for a beginner rider. But just like with cruisers, if you are determined to start on a sport bike and decide for yourself if you like it or not, there are a couple of decent options along with the KTM RC390, which we already discussed. Kawasaki Ninja 400. This bike is a good choice for a beginner sport bike rider because it has a more or less comfortable riding position, by sport bike standards. Its handlebars are not extremely low and the foot pegs are not extremely high, so the Ninja has somewhat comfortable position, again by sport bike standards. It's pretty lightweight and has pretty potent motor for its class. The power delivery is predictable and manageable, and the engine is smoother and vibrates less than the thumper on the RC390. So, if you want to try sport bike style, Ninja 400 may be the best choice, being sort of the moderate choice. Next one on the list is Yamaha R3. R3 maybe is the best sport bike in its class. It has awesome cornering abilities, the engine is surprisingly powerful for its size, and because of the low weight, the bike is very dynamic. It's an awesome learning platform for a beginner sport bike rider. If you want to try yourself on track, R3 is just an incredible motorcycle, and its popularity is very well earned. Another very interesting couple of bikes which I want to mention are Kawasaki KLX300 and KLX300 SM. It's essentially the same bike, the main difference are wheels. KLX300 has an off-road wheels. KLX300 SM has 17-inch wheels with road tires, which makes it a supermoto style bike. What makes these bikes interesting for beginner riders are their extremely lightweight at 138 kilos, or 300 pounds. Awesome maneuverability, easily controllable throttle, very small turning radiuses and above all their insane toughness. I had a Kawasaki D-Tracker 250, which is essentially the same bike as KLX300 SM, as a training bike for me and my students. It went through everything. It have been dropped dozens of times, it slided, it jumped, it did wheelies and stoppies. I taught people to make clutchless shifting and slow speed riding with dragging the clutch. It went through everything and never let me down once. So it can be an awesome bike for training as your first bike, or if you just need a second bike for training. As your one and only motorcycle, it's debatable since it has no ABS and it is not very capable of highway speeds. Otherwise, awesome motorcycles, pick yours. If you want to ride mostly on pavement, get SM version. If you also want to ride trails, get the off-road version. At the end, I want to mention 3 more bikes, which are more heavy and powerful options. I decided to include them because, though I can praise small light bikes for beginners all day long, there still will be people which will want to get big, powerful motorcycle. Getting big, powerful motorcycle nowadays is not nearly as bad as it used to be, because now there are plenty of electronic assistants to help manage the huge engine and braking power. But you still have to do something with the big weight and big cost. A lot of my students who bought a heavy expensive bike as their first one had very big problem learning and practicing riding techniques. That happens because rider fears to drop his bike. First, it's scary, and second, it's expensive. Big heavy bikes really slow down your progress at first. Buy a small and light one. But if you discard all that and think you are up to the challenge, okay, here are 3 more options for you. BMW F900 XR. In my opinion, it's one of the best bikes on the market today for day-to-day riding. It is very dynamic, corners extremely well, have very good maneuverability and turning radiuses. Awesome brakes, tires and suspension, very comfortable and universal upright riding position and plenty of power. There are a lot of modern electronics like ABS, quick shifter and traction control, dynamic brake control, lots and lots of new cool technology. Bike has an inline 2-cylinder engine which produces 105 horsepower and the weight is 219 kilos or 480 pounds. So the bike is very dynamic and very fast. I like how, if you watch some reviews of this bike, people there will be like, "Oh, this engine is slow engine from 700 GS. The liter engine on 1000 XR is much faster. Buy a 1000 XR. 900 is slow." For me, it's like saying that Starship Enterprise is slow because Millennial Falcon reaches the warp speed 1/1000th of a second faster. Realistically, on public roads, you'll just never be able to use the whole potential of this bike. If you think you are either fooling yourself or you are not going to have a very long motorcycling career. Another bike in this list will be BMW R1250 GS. Despite its big mass, it's surprisingly nimble bike. It has really tight turning radius and a big torque from the low end, which will allow you to master the slow speed riding quite easily, if you manage to go past the fear of dropping the bike. Speaking of dropping it, it's a very popular motorcycle, so there are plenty of aftermarket protection options. You can slap the protection everywhere. Engine head covers, fairing plastics protection, windscreen protection, headlight protection and luggage rack, which also acts like rear fairing and muffler protection. All this stuff you can and probably should install, considering the cost of the bike. Otherwise, a ton of various electronic gizmos will make your life easier. Your engine acts smoother and suspension work better. Oh, and the brakes are awesome. So if you must have a very heavy bike for some reason, this is probably one of the best choices. And now it's time for the last bike on our list. You wouldn't believe what gets an honorable mention for today. It's Harley Pan America. The bike really surprised me. I would never thought Harley Davidson can make such an agile motorcycle. Just like the GS, it's a very heavy bike, but it feels much more maneuverable than GS. GS is already very good too, but Pan America feels like supermoto compared to it. Okay, maybe not a supermoto, but how it flicks from side to side, it feels more like maybe 750 GS or maybe 950 Multistrada. It corners pretty well, it can do off-road stuff, it's very comfortable, has plenty of power, technology and awesome Brembo brakes. I would even say it's better than GS, at least on the paved roads. The only downside is that the Pan America is very new model, and it yet doesn't have the huge aftermarket with countless cages, seats, panniers and windshields the GS has. And the customization is pretty important for an adventure class motorcycle. So here it is, my list of 16 best motorcycles for a beginner rider. If you are a beginner, make sure you buy only motorcycles from this list. If you already own something else, sell it immediately and buy the right one. Also, like this video, click the subscribe button and have a nice day. Bye!